This video is going to look at a research paper and what a paper in a psychological journal would actually look like. So if we look at the specification, you've got to know how to report psychological investigations. You've got to know about specific sections of a scientific report. So you've got to know what an abstract is, what the introduction would include, the methodology, the results section, the discussion section, and also what the referencing section would look like. So you've got to know these particular parts in order, because any of them could come up as a short question. So the first part of any journal article or research article would be the abstract. And the abstract is basically a very short summary of the study. You can see in this bottom hand corner over here, you can see the abstract, this tiny part at the very start of the paper. And it's basically there to provide you with sufficient information to establish whether it's worth reading the rest of the report or not. An abstract can include loads and loads of different things. So it'll give you one sentence on any information on background. It'll give you the aim and the hypothesis, what research method was used. They'll give you some information on the sample, who was involved in the actual study. They'll give you a brief detail of the conditions and what the participants actually had to do. They'll give you some results and some data as well. They'll give you a conclusion in regards to did they reject the hypothesis or accept that hypothesis. And also they'll give you a general conclusion in regards to the aim of the study. So you can see there's an awful lot of information packed into that first small paragraph. Once you've read all this, you know whether it's worth reading the rest of the paper or not. So you've read the abstract and you decide to keep reading. Next you come to the introduction of the paper. And the introduction gives you a very broad introduction to that specific area. So it might be a memory paper, a study on memory. It gives you a broad introduction into the research done on memory. It might introduce you to specific topics such as the capacity of short-term memory. And it will define any key terms for the reader. It also describes any key theories and any key studies done in that particular area, like memory. But also it will state the aim of the paper, for example, to investigate the effect of the IV on the DV. And also it will give you a hypothesis, usually in one sentence. We predict that, and whatever will happen. So you've read your abstract, you've read your introduction, now you move on to the methodology. And most of you should know what this is from AS or from any GCSE science that you did as well. So this is where you talk about all the apparatus and all the methods and materials that you used, and it's described in full detail. And everything is given. The methodological choices such as your research design and the method of investigation are given, and it's all very step-by-step standardized procedures so that anybody could replicate what you've put down. Then you've got the results section. The results section usually puts the data generated from the study. So you might have in tables, in graphs, you'll have any descriptive statistics such as central tendency and dispersion with standard deviation and range in there. You'll also look at inferential statistics, so any calculated values, any statistical tests, significance levels, probability levels, all of that information will be included here to work out whether the results show a significant difference or not. Then you move on to the discussion, and the discussion will really relate your findings back to the hypothesis. Did you accept your hypothesis? Did you reject it? And it'll also give you a summary of the results, a brief explanation of what your results actually showed. And then you get to compare your results to any background materials that you'd already discussed. So in your introduction, you discussed these were the findings from this particular area. Now you compare your findings to those. Do your findings agree with previous studies or do they not? And you discuss the reasons why they agree with them or why they don't. Then you say if there's any implications for the real world. So do your studies have a significant bearing on explaining behaviour in a certain way, or can it result in any changes in society? So you try and link it to the real world if possible. Then you've got to identify any limitations. Every study will have limitations. So you've got to try and identify those and then explain constructive ways of how your study could be improved. And also suggest any areas for future research. So you might change one of the variables, you might change a particular part of the study in order to investigate something else. So you can see there's a lot of information that can be discussed in the discussion section of a paper. So the final part of a paper is the referencing section. And this is usually including any full details of any journal articles or books that are mentioned in the report. So remember back in the introduction section, you would have included details of past theories and studies. This is where you include all the details of those studies and of those theories. And it's set out using something called the Harvard referencing system. So it includes the surnames of the authors, the date, the title of that paper, the journal where it could be found in. And for every study you talk about, or every theory you talk about, at any point throughout your research paper, you must reference it in this referencing section at the end.